This week on ICN, the stories you should have heard, but didn't. Washington makes Bank of America CEO an offer he couldn't refuse. Which one of these people looks out of place? Workers are turning the lights out in France to protest wages. The Director of Homeland Security needs to freshen up on the law. Those stories and more next on Informed Citizen News. Hello and welcome to ICN, Informed Citizen News, April 26, 2009. Our first story made some of the national headlines this week, but deserves more attention. New York's Attorney General released details from interviews with Ken Lewis, CEO of Bank of America, and Henry Paulson, former Secretary of the Treasury, regarding the September 2008 B of A takeover of Merrill Lynch. Lewis was reluctant to acquire Merrill Lynch because he knew they had a slew of toxic assets, which would result in future losses. He told the New York Attorney General that Paulson had essentially threatened to remove him as CEO if he didn't go through with the acquisition of Merrill Lynch. Henry Paulson confirmed the threat during an interview with the Attorney General, but he said that Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke had instructed him to give the ultimatum to Bank of America's CEO. After this news came out, Paulson recanted his version and claimed that the threat to remove B of A's CEO was his own words and not those of Bernanke. CEO Lewis ended up going along with the deal and did not disclose expected losses to shareholders. Can you count how many laws were broken with this blatant admission? First, B of A is guilty of securities fraud by withholding material facts from shareholders during the vote to approve the Merrill Lynch acquisition. Next, Paulson was essentially blackmailing Lewis to do the government's bidding or lose his job. Paulson recanted his statement that he threatened CEO Lewis at Bernanke's request. He did this because the Fed is supposed to be independent of the government and is not supposed to be giving orders to the Secretary of the Treasury. This is just one instance of the backroom dealings that have occurred over the past 18 months. Just imagine what really happened behind closed doors during the AIG, Bear Stearns, and Lehman Brothers discussions. We won't hold our breath waiting for the prosecution of these self-admitted criminals. There were big headlines all over the news announcing Andreas Sandiego as the newest member on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list. By putting Mr. Sandiego on the list, the FBI elevated him to the status as Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri, the same men suspected of masterminding the 9/11 attacks, assassinating Anwar Sadat, along with numerous other terrorist acts. Also on the FBI list are 21 other suspected Muslim terrorists. In fact, prior to the addition of Mr. Sandiego, the most wanted terrorist list consisted of only Muslim militant extremists. Mr. Sandiego, allegedly tied to animal rights extremist groups, is accused of being involved in the bombings of 3 San Francisco area office buildings in 2003. Although no one was hurt and the bomb damage was minor, the explosions were potentially lethal. The national press completely missed several key questions that should have been asked of the FBI and government. Why was he added to the list now, 6 years after the bombings? Why him? Is he a current danger to public safety? Was Mr. Sandiego's addition to the terrorist list an effort at political correctness after leaked government reports on right-wing extremism? Now we realize that the government is in a no-win situation with the recent reports out of Missouri and Homeland Security that associated third-party activism and conservative beliefs with terrorism. If the government put out another attack on conservatives or libertarians, they would be accused of bias and piling on. By targeting a left-leaning suspected terrorist, they could be accused of purposefully trying to be politically correct and balancing the score. There has been no sighting of Mr. Sandiego in 6 years, and he is believed to be in Mexico or Central America. The timing of his addition is peculiar in light of the recent reports on so-called right-wing extremism. The FBI was allowed to put out their press release without anyone in the media questioning their motives. Has a revolution begun in France? News reports of infrastructure sabotage and CEO kidnappings are becoming rampant. There have been several CEOs kidnapped by union workers as part of a new labor negotiation tactic. Caterpillar, Sony, 3M, HP, and Gucci also have weathered hostage incidents in recent weeks amid widespread job cuts. A new strategy employed by disgruntled workers is to selectively shut down electricity to portions of Paris in an attempt to extract higher wages from the government. This week, the activists sought to win public support by switching 350,000 customers from peak to off-peak rates, a 50% savings. They also restored power to hundreds of households that were cut off because they had failed to pay their bills. People are not happy, and things are starting to get out of control. Looks like our Director of Homeland Security needs to brush up on the law. This week, Janet Napolitano stated to CNN that illegal immigration is not really a crime. She went on to say that crossing the border is not a crime per se, it is civil. Wrong, Ms. Napolitano. Crossing the U.S. border without permission is a crime. The statute reads, "Any alien who enters or attempts to enter the United States at any time or place other than as designated by immigration officers shall for the first commission of any such offense be fined under Title 18 or imprisoned not more than 6 months or both." It is one thing to know the law and then claim discretion when it comes to enforcement. It is a whole different matter to be our head of Homeland Security and be ignorant of our basic border crossing laws. Do you feel the disconnect between the recent upswing in the stock market and the bad news that continues to flow out of the economy? Unemployment is now up to 8.5% according to the government, or if you include everyone that would like full-time employment, it's actually at 15.6%. Capital One, a large credit card company, reports soaring defaults, and they don't see it getting better anytime soon. The latest mortgage default news from California, which will be the epicenter of the next wave of foreclosures, was that missed home loan payments hit a record in March. The scary part is that missed payments by borrowers are not only attributed to adjustable loans and unemployment, but also by borrowers who are purposefully withholding payments in order to qualify for a loan modification. The government programs and the banks has set up a system that encourages people to not pay their mortgage in order to get attention. Government intervention always has unintended consequences. We'll end this week's show with some scenes from Saturday's End the Fed rally. Thanks for watching, and see you next week on Informed Citizen News.
End the Fed! End the Fed! Find out how! Find out how! End the Fed! End the Fed! End it now! End it now! End the Fed! End the Fed!
Out here to help raise awareness on H.R. 1207, which is the Federal Reserve Transparency Act of 2009. The bill would provide for the first audit of the Federal Reserve System. Some say since its creation in 1913, others say since the 1950s, but either way, we need some transparency and accountability into the inner operations of the Federal Reserve.
Sure, I'm here to support the cause of ending the Federal Reserve and also supporting H.R. 1207, which is to audit the Federal Reserve. There's legislation in the House right now with 91 plus sponsors and co-sponsors, so that's the first step towards ending the Federal Reserve, and I'm glad to be here. You know, that's the ultimate goal. You know, repeal and abolish the Federal Reserve Act of 1913.